Hey guys, welcome back to the Sweat Elite podcast and another episode of In My Opinion. This is number 23, and if you're watching this on YouTube, of which I am publishing these on YouTube every week now on the Sweat Elite podcast channel, not the main Sweat Elite channel. We made a new one a couple of weeks back. You'll notice that I'm in a different room to usual. I'm not at home, I'm not in Chicago at the moment. I'm in Tucson, Arizona for 3 days before heading up to Phoenix to start our first Globe Runners experience in Scottsdale, which is right next to Phoenix, starting on Friday. So I came down here on Monday to stay with an athlete that I coach, actually. I'll speak about that in a minute. But yeah, I'm in the room at the moment, so in a regular bedroom, not in my normal working room, so background's a bit different to normal. But otherwise, still trucking on, all things going well. And in this episode, I'll talk about being 10 days post-Houston Marathon and 3.5 weeks from Osaka Marathon, talk a bit about that. Ran with Sam Long this morning, professional triathlete. I'll talk a bit about that. I tried Bicarb for the first time yesterday. Well, not really the first time ever. I tried it 15 years ago, I think it was, when I was training for the 800 meters, maybe 13 or 14 years ago, but it wasn't the Morton Bicarb, which is supposed to be a little bit easier on the gut. And I've had a whole lot of questions coming on Instagram about that. Short version is, I think my response, and I'll answer all these questions so you get a better idea of my, response to it. The Bicarb, I had a pretty hard workout yesterday. It was 2 miles at threshold, 10 400s at mile effort with 90 seconds rest. So quite high intensity workout, lactic production relatively high, and then 1 mile tempo. So pretty good workout to try this Bicarb on, from all I understand, because from all the research I've seen and understood, it's probably a little bit more effective for middle distance runners with lactate accumulation as opposed to marathoners. But, I hate to be bland, disappointing, but it's hard to tell if it really does anything in training. And almost everyone I've heard talk about this says the same thing. Even Emmanuel, who gifted me the Bicarb to use, I didn't buy it. He had a whole lot here left over from his experiment, or his trialing of it, sorry. And look, I'll answer all these questions. I guess I'll dive into it a bit now, but yeah, I had a good workout, and I think the only thing that I noticed to be maybe a little bit different or a little bit advanced was the recovery afterwards. Like, I was feeling very fresh, like 30 or 60 minutes after the workout, almost like I hadn't done it. So I don't know if that is supposed to happen, if that's an effect or whatnot, but in the workout itself, I would struggle to be able to pinpoint a specific difference that it made. I don't think I necessarily felt any better. I think I said to Luke straight after the workout when I was WhatsApping him, I said, maybe I was recovering slightly faster within the reps, because the 10 400s, I had 90 seconds rest. I was running them in about 63, 64 seconds. I think one or two of them were in 62. And, I do remember thinking to myself after each rep, the 10, 15 seconds after it, I was like, wow, very high heart rate, very high, probably lactate. But then 50 or 60 seconds after the rep, I felt like I could have gone again. Whereas I don't think I can normally do that 50 or 60 seconds after running that fast. And yeah, even though I was taking 90 seconds, I almost felt like 60 seconds wouldn't have made a difference. Now, I don't know if that's actually true, so I didn't try it, but I remember thinking to myself after 50 seconds of recovery every time, I was like, I feel like I can go again now. Now, that's unusual. That's probably the only thing I could think of, but who knows? Like, that might have been the case anyway, because I haven't done a lot of workouts like that recently. I've done the 18 400s, I think 3 weeks ago, 3 sets of 6. They were actually one of the workouts of the week a few weeks back. And in that workout, the last set of 6 was at about the same pace, 62, 63, 61. I think one of them was in 60. I was having 90 seconds rest. Now, I don't remember ever thinking in that workout, well, I could probably take 60 seconds rest. In fact, I remember thinking that I probably needed more recovery. I probably needed 2 minutes rest to run that pace. But yesterday wasn't the same pace. It was slightly slower because I was probably still struggling with a little bit of, well, not struggling, still dealing with a little bit of fatigue from Houston. So I don't know. It's hard to say. But I'll answer these questions shortly before I get into the longer questions, because I've got some really good questions this week from email. And once again, if you are listening and you'd like to submit a question that I can answer, it's about 2-3 weeks, maybe sometimes 4 weeks of a delay. I try and answer the questions. I skim through all the questions that come through, and if they seem relevant to right now, like, I don't want to answer a Bicarb question in 4 weeks. I want to answer it today because I just tried it. So questions that are not super relevant to right now will go earlier, and questions that are sort of very general will be 2 to 4 weeks away. But if you do want to submit one, the best way to do that would be to email, because I filter the emails by just typing in my opinion, into my Gmail search box, and everything that comes up I read and move over to the notes. So it's matt@sweatelite.co, so not .com, if you are interested in submitting a question, because love the questions that come in and love answering them. And they make this podcast very easy because I don't have to really come up with any content. And the preparation time for these are about 10 minutes. I just come up with the workouts of the week, skim through the questions, and then hit record and pretty much do no other pre-planning. But I guess before I do go on to talking about any of those things in more detail, I want to say that the Shelby Houlihan opinion 2 weeks back wasn't met with much. I was actually a bit surprised. I thought I'd be met with a little bit more heat from what I said about, her maybe potentially being innocent by everything I've understood. I was sent a few messages from friends very politely to tell me information I didn't know about. That it definitely does not look good. And I think listening back to what I said, definitely I left some gaps in that, but I didn't intentionally do that. I just didn't know about those bits of information about some of the studies and some of the sort of information that came out around her case, which upon learning that stuff, it definitely seemed like it was not very, very, very unlikely, potentially impossible for her to be clean. So anyway, thought I'd just say that. I am aware of that, and I did miss a couple of things, but that wasn't intentional. It was just that I didn't know it. So anyway. All right, well, before I do move on to the questions, I am down here for Globe Runners, and that's starting on Friday, and it's Wednesday today. I do have a question about Globe Runners, which was a very basic one, but I thought I'd just share it. And even though I did reply to this individual directly on email, I'll reply here. Bettina sent me an email on January the 24th, so 5 days ago. It said, "Hey, Matt, crazy question, but can women also go on your Globe Runners camps? Thanks, B. Polos." Looks like she works at Microsoft, I think. Or, Crown. Probably shouldn't have shared that anyway. Haven't said her full name. She absolutely, yes, you definitely can come if you're a female. In fact, most of our experiences have probably 60-40 men, women. Maybe I think some of them have even been pretty close to 50-50. And in January last year, when we had our one in Portugal, where we've had our biggest attendance, I think it was 21. We usually cap out at 20, but someone asked to join someone late and we could fit them in. I think it was basically 50-50 in that experience. So in this particular one, this weekend, we have a few women coming, but yeah, absolutely. All are welcome. Any standard is welcome to come. If you love to run, love to travel, love to explore, love to meet people, love to learn, and love to eat great meals with people and just make good connections, these camps are definitely for you. I've tried to go away from using the word camp, more of an experience, because I don't want people to think that if they come, they have to train twice a day, every day. You don't have to train at all if you don't want to, but of course there are 2 sessions every day on offer. And yeah, it's also important to note that you don't have to do any of the training if you don't want. You can come along in the cars or the transport and just hang out, but of course you're welcome to join any of them. It's very, very flexible. I even mentioned on a previous episode of In My Opinion a few weeks back when someone asked about remote work during these experiences. Many people in the past have come and worked remotely on these experiences. I might take back the word many, but there's definitely been quite a few. And in the Portugal one, I think I mentioned there was a few that were working during that 2-week experience. So, they would attend meetings through the day and whatever they could make. And usually they'd make 70 or 80% of the things. And we try and make up for them as well. If they missed something, I would sometimes jump on the bike and ride with them afterwards if that was possible. So yeah, absolutely anyone can come. So Bettina, even though I did directly respond to you in email, absolutely women are very welcome to come. So yeah, I guess before I answer the longer questions and go through the workouts of the week, I might start answering some of these questions about the bicarb that came through on Instagram. So I tried a regular dose of the Morton bicarb about 40 minutes before I started this workout, which was 2 miles at threshold, 10 400s at mile effort, and then 1 mile at threshold. I personally found the taste pretty easy, and I think that's been a struggle for a lot of people. If you think that taste is bad, you should try ketone shots. I mean, they have gotten better for sure. The most recent ketone IQ shot, at least the peach one's not too bad, but the first one is much worse than this bicarb. I think the bicarb was just sort of tasteless. And a lot of people on these questions on Instagram were sort of wondering if I was able to stomach it. I thought the taste was fine. I didn't think that was a problem at all. Tasted quite bland, quite sort of just nothingness. It didn't have a very strong flavor, but I think the taste is not something to worry about in my opinion. But then again, everyone's slightly different. We don't all like the same stuff. NHRRSN said, did you SHIT myself? I did not. In fact, that was non-noticeable at all. My gut was completely normal. Did you have any, so Caleb McVeigh, did you have any lightheadedness at the start of your bicarb session or during? None. I've sort of already said this at the start of the episode, but it was almost like I couldn't really notice it was even there. And the main thing I noticed was the recovery rate in the workout, but then again, maybe would have happened anyway. And then the other thing was after the workout, when I thought to myself, man, an hour later, I was like, I could do that workout again. Now, of course, I couldn't do that workout again, but mentally, I just felt very well recovered. And you know what? I woke up this morning and felt very well recovered, probably more so than normal. But I did have creatine, ketones, protein, carbs immediately after the workout as well. And that combination has been making my recovery much better anyway. So it's always difficult when you're trying so many things at once. It's difficult to pinpoint what exactly is helping the most. I think at the moment it's the creatine, but I don't know for sure. I think it just might be a simple case of it being quite deadly if it's a combination of some things together. It's almost like 1 + 1 probably doesn't equal 2 in this case. Ketones plus creatine plus protein might not be a simple case of 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It might be 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. I don't know. This is coming from no science. It's coming from literally me taking it and feeling how it feels, which is very powerful, very powerful. So yeah. Lance Haynes asks, how long do you wait to run after a meal before... Okay, that's actually not related. I'll answer it anyway. How long do you wait to run after a meal before... Sorry, a lot of these questions in these Instagram things are actually not related to the Bicarb, but if I start answering one, I'll talk about one, I'll just answer it. How long do you wait to run after a meal before a hard workout? How long do you wait to run after a meal before a hard workout? It depends how big the meal is. I'll have a bowl of rice half an hour before I go for a run sometimes, but a regular meal, lunch or dinner, normally at 2 hours, but everyone's different here. I know people that struggle to go for a run 4 hours after a workout, after a big meal. I can eat a big pizza and go for a run straight away, but typically I will wait about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Before a marathon, I'll eat an hour and a half to 2 hours. That seems like the safe spot because it gives you enough time to process, go to the toilet, feel light again, and then go. But yeah, I'm very fortunate that, I struggle with some things with cramping and so on and so forth, but the gut is one thing that I very rarely struggle with. But occasionally I will. Just sometimes my stomach will get a little bit rough. It's very occasional, and sometimes I don't even really know what exactly it is. It just could be something that I ate that wasn't 100% fresh. I don't know. All right, let's try and find some more questions. Midlife Runner asks, are you trying to train the gut to tolerate 120 grams an hour like David Roche in Leadville? So I'm not sure if this question is related to the Bicarb because I haven't watched or listened to all of David Roche's content, even though I think he is awesome. I've listened to half probably, and at least over the last 6 months. Before 6 months ago, I'd never even heard of David Roche, which, I don't really pay attention that much to the trail space. But the answer to this question is I can already tolerate 120 grams of carbs an hour. I've done that several times and it's worked every time. But I'm wondering, in fact, I coach Midlife Runner, so I might ask him directly. I'm wondering if there is any link between Bicarb and training the gut. David Roche has probably talked about that, or maybe Midlife Runner, Mr. Pozza here, is just asking a simple question. Not super sure, but to answer the question specifically, am I trying to train the gut? I am not, but if I couldn't do 120 grams, I would, because I think that's the sweet spot for someone of my weight, around 120 grams. But there's people that would disagree with that, and there's many things out there saying that 90 grams, 100 grams is the max, and you should not go past that, and there's no point. But I definitely find more benefit going higher. Laura STSI says, how many grams of carbs does it have to go with the bicarbonate? Okay, so clearly I am missing something here, and there's some link between carbs and bicarbonate. But I did consume a carb-heavy drink, very heavy, before and during this workout. I ran with a water bottle in my hand. Reem normally joins me on workouts on the bike, but she wasn't able to yesterday due to a emergency family situation. She had to go to Chicago for a couple of days, which is where she is now. I actually ran with a small bottle in my hand and drank it, and that was very high carb. I had about 100 grams of carbs in an hour per hour. So I have to research this more to see what the link between bicarb and carbs are. Now, some people listening to this that are very familiar would probably be laughing, going, man, you're missing out. You have no idea what you're doing. I don't know. So I'm going to have to look into that. But bicarb, I am clueless about at this point. I have tried it once, at least the latest branded stuff. I tried it, the homemade version, many, many years ago and had a hard time and felt very sick. But it seems like I need to experiment with this more because it's interesting. It's just so damn expensive. Mbitian23 asked, did you take it on an empty stomach? Also, did you have to increase your fluid intake? I did not take it on an empty stomach. I had a meal 2 hours before. I had some chicken and rice and vegetables. Did I have to increase my fluid intake? I didn't. I just did normal fluid intake. Maybe that's what I'm missing. I don't know. Guys, if you're listening to this and you know answers to me being this clueless about this particular topic, please email me because I'd love to learn, especially from people that have actually tried it. I don't want to read any propaganda marketing material. I want to hear direct feedback from people that have no incentive. Tony White asked something interesting here, and I've actually questioned him about this. He said, did you use the hack by putting your weight to 300 pounds? And at first I thought he was maybe referring to something else. And then I asked him what he meant, and he said that when you order, you can put your weight in there and they send you the amount or something like that. Now, I didn't order this. I borrowed or used some of Emmanuel's who I'm staying with. So I don't know what that process looks like, but if you know, I'm going to ask Tony more about this. He said something like, at least with some brands, if you put your weight higher, they supply you with more. I don't know what that's about. Might be a thing with Morton. I don't know. I have to look into it. Shannon asks, generic versus brand fuels, how much difference? I use maltodextrin of Amazon thanks to you, I think. So I think she's more so referring to like, in Bicarb, there is the Morton one, and then there's homemade, simpler, cheaper ones. Maybe not simpler, maybe they're the same. I can't speak to that because I haven't tried it. I've only tried the Morton one, and I didn't even notice that much. But when it comes to sugar drinks, it's wild to me how much some companies get away with charging for a bit of sugar with flavor and a few electrolytes. Like, this is the weirdest thing with carb drink mixes. Like, we can literally buy the cheapest bulk ingredients of sodium, magnesium, and potassium, buy a bit of sugar and mix them together with a little bit of, maybe even a little bit of flavoring. You could buy, some magnesium tablets that have some flavoring, or sodium that has some flavoring, or some of the electrolyte tablets out there that have some flavoring. And you can make a drink that is literally pretty much exactly the same for about 90% less. But people just get massively sucked into branding. I'll never forget, in the first video series that I ever did about my own journey in 2022, leading into Berlin Marathon, I started talking about this because I've known about this forever, that branding is very powerful and, there's lots of ways to do things much cheaper, which is basically the same thing. And I shared on a video that, you should just go buy maltodextrin and simple things and mix them all together. And then the Morton representatives reached out to me and said, our product is actually quite a bit, because I said in the video, this is basically just like Morton, but 80% cheaper. And someone obviously watched it, and they reached out to me and said, it's not exactly like that. We have this different type of system. And maybe that's all true. But I would argue that the cost difference to get that hydrogel stuff is not really going to help you that much, in my opinion. But I'm more than happy to hear from someone that I'm wrong. Heart, Try and Soul says, consuming it is the best part. Have fun. Okay, so they obviously like the taste. The Real Daniel So says, I just take half dosage for workouts. Works just fine and saves money. Okay. I think it's supposed to be more beneficial for 5K 800 meter pace rather than an LT session. Yeah, I think that's true. Even though this did have mile pace in it, I have heard that too. Michael asks, what was your Bicarb protocol and how did you feel during the workout? The protocol was mixing it together like it says in the box and then doing a regular workout. I didn't do anything special. Maybe that's what I'm missing. So please do let me know. I feel like I've gone on for 10 minutes here, really demonstrating how clueless I am about Bicarb. This is one area of nutrition and science or whatever that I have no idea about, but I'd like to learn a lot more. Okay, Reese Run says, I would also recommend Bicarb, Bicarb, same job or better, and just a fraction of the price. There you go. There's a nice little plug for that company. I'd never heard of them. Tell me stomaching this wasn't the hardest part of the whole thing, from Luke. Yeah, once again, I didn't mind it. I didn't think it was too bad. All the other questions here are mostly related to... here we go. AJ Bunny 86 says, cheaper DIY version, bicarbonate of soda, sugar, water, and pectin. There you go. So, yeah, I've answered all the questions. I'm sorry that I don't have a more exciting and interesting response. I feel like in order to really understand if this is doing anything, if it's really working, you're going to need to get pretty good with measuring stuff, measuring lactate, measuring heart rate, measuring glucose, measuring whatever else you can measure. Maybe that one of those Moxie monitors. I don't know if that has anything to do with this, the muscle oxygen, stuff. I feel like in order to really know, because I feel like it's probably one of those things that it might help 1%. And you might not notice it in your own mind. You might only notice it if you measure something. That's the case with a lot of things. In your own training, you might not necessarily feel the difference, but if you measure it, you're like, oh yeah, there's a 1% difference and a 1% in a marathon. If you are, literally improving by 1%, that is a minute and a half, 2 minutes for someone around 2 hours 20. And that's a lot. I spent 3 years trying to break a silly arbitrary barrier that I came up with. And if I just took a drink beforehand of bicarb of 1%, and I'm not saying bicarb makes you 1% better, but I'm getting, you know what I'm trying to say. So I feel like even though I don't really like doing a whole lot of measuring and a whole lot of, deep dive on the data of my training, only because I feel like it sucks the joy and love away from running a little bit. I like to keep things a lot more to feel, a lot more adventurous, a lot more running in the wild and getting away from that stuff. I feel like in order to really know if bicarb is doing anything, you're going to need to get the tools out and the measuring out. That's my gut feeling, because the general feel is so marginal that you end up going, okay, if this was $1 a shot, I'd probably do it. It's sort of like beetroot powder. That reminds me of that. Like, it just came to my mind. Beet powder is the same thing. I've never really heard anyone say, oh, look, this is really working. I've heard a lot of people say, I think it might work a little bit. I've never really taken beet before. I think I've taken it a few times, but never stuck with it long term. But in order to really understand, it's one of those things you have to measure VO2 max and measure, maybe, I don't even know what you'd measure there, but let me tell you this, do not take beetroot and measure the VO2 improvement on your watch, because your watch is not measuring your VO2 max. I think that should not even be allowed to have VO2 max on the Garmin watches, because that is not VO2 max. Even though a lot of people believe it and a lot of people look at it and a lot of people think it is not. I've spoken about that before. To get proper VO2 max readings, you need to be in a lab and you need to know your body weight. So the point is, I think with lots of these little supplements that are coming out now, beta-alanine included, which I haven't started taking at all, but I will, I think measuring is a key. You need to be able to measure it to see if it's actually doing anything. Okay, that was my bicarb experience. Will I keep taking it? Look, I don't think so, mostly because it's so expensive. I think for 4 packets, it was $75 or something like that. So that's every packet's almost $20. It's $18. That could be slightly off the mark, but it's close. Yeah, look, I don't know if I can justify that, especially if I can't tell the difference. With creatine and ketones, I'm really clearly noticing that I'm recovering faster. That's really noticeable in my own mind. So as a result, I'm more than happy to buy more. And I buy the creatine. Some brands have sent me some stuff, but I've also bought other stuff, mostly because I've heard that, some of the, even though I have said before I was wrong about something to do with creatine, I've said just any brand will do. Apparently that's not the case, and some brands are just not as good quality as others, or not as pure as others. Now, I'm sure that's the case with almost anything. But I'm happy to invest. And I do get the ketones for free, but at this point, I absolutely would buy them. And I would have them after every hard workout, even if they cut me off from giving them for free, because I'm really noticing the improvement in the recovery. Okay, on to some of the questions of the week before we get into the workouts of the week. All right, bear with me. I've got some long ones here. Hamish, email, asks, hey Matt, big fan of your podcast, particularly the IMO series, like 99% of your listener base it seems. Can't have an original thought out here. Just wanted to shoot you a quick email regarding Jim Walmsley's recent YouTube documentary. Firstly, I think it's a fantastic watch and inspirational and informative in many ways. Specifically, though, I wanted to ask for your view on him taking by the way, for those not familiar with Jim Walmsley, he is arguably the second greatest ultramarathon runner of all time, or maybe potentially the first. Him and Kilian Jornet sort of battle it out at the very top there. A few guys very close, but he's regarded as probably one of the very best ultra runners of all time. Also run a pretty damn good marathon, 2:14, 2:15, I think he ran. Specifically, though, I wanted to ask for your opinion on your view of him taking the winter season essentially entirely off from running and instead pursuing other forms of cardio such as skiing and cycling. Before then, coming back into running in summer and somewhat dominating in what has to be some of the most muscularly and skeletally taxing events that exist. I remember you recently posting an IG story about runners who take a complete break from running for X amount of weeks and then return, train, and end up with stronger VO2 results than their peers who continue to train, and whether this story of Walmsley falls within a similar vein. Interested to hear your thoughts, and best of luck in your upcoming races and professional endeavors. Hamish. So I actually didn't know that about Jim, that he was taking all that time off. But in my eyes, the whole idea of taking rest is really interesting. And I started to get very fascinated about this probably towards the very end of my middle distance running crusade. I wouldn't call it a career because I didn't make any teams or never really had any big sponsorships. My middle distance days. Because, I was surrounded by people that were scared to take 1 month off training or even 2 weeks off training because they thought that they would lose too much fitness for the following year. And simultaneously, I was hearing about David Rudisha still to this day, he still has the 800 meter world record, doesn't he? Yeah, he does. A few people have come very close. David Rudisha, he must be 35, 36 now, has been retired for 5-6 years, but he won the Olympics in London and in Rio in the 800 and broke the world record at London. I believe he has like 5 of the 10 fastest times in 800. That may have changed. Last year there was a lot of fast times, but he still has the world record. I remember him taking 2 to 3 months off a year. And I remember thinking to myself, that's insane. Like, he would be so much better if he didn't do that. Now, that's obviously stupid. Usain Bolt, same thing. I heard about him taking 8 to 10 weeks off every year. I then started to hear about some of the best swimmers in the world, like Gary Hall Jr., who won the Olympics in 2000, I think, in the 50 free, 100 free, one of those two. I remember him taking 3 months a year off swimming. And I remember thinking to myself, like, have I lost it? Like, or has everyone around me lost it? Like, is recovery maybe really important and we're missing something here? So my thoughts are, like, when you've got a lot of lifetime volume in the bank, like Jim has been running, I don't know how long, but it's at least 12 years, probably upwards of 15, 20 years at a high level. And he was very good even in college many years ago. Once you've got so much aerobic volume in your legs, if you take time off, so I'm a good example of this, to be honest. Like, I'd love to use someone else, but like, this is just literally first-hand experience of my own. Now, I've shared this story several times on the podcast before, but I've been doing an average of 50 miles a week or 90K a week since 2004, 2005. A couple of years there I took sort of off with work. But, in 2021, when I took 6 weeks entirely off running, I quit. My Achilles was just completely cooked. Had been running in pain for so long. I quit running, 6 weeks completely off. When I came back to running, within 8 weeks, I was basically back in the same shape, maybe even 7 weeks. In fact, I was in much better shape than what I was. What I mean by back to the same shape is all like the same, like back to my best shape, basically. Because where I was when I took that 6 weeks off was actually pretty unfit because I'd been struggling to string together 2 days of running in a row for a year because my Achilles was so sore. So back to gym, I think that when you've got so many years of training under your belt, you can really afford to take a lot of time off. And I think we're yet to, when I say we, like humans, we're yet to really understand the value. Like, I think we're yet to really understand the psychological benefits of rest as well. We know the basics, but when I took those 6 weeks off running in 2021, between mid-May and mid-June, end of June, I started training in end of June, and then in early November, ran 220, only 14 weeks later or 15 weeks later. That 6 weeks off running and not even thinking about running and just completely getting away from it and not worrying about it and not obsessing over it and not thinking about workouts and analyzing stuff, of which I don't really do that much anymore. I feel like that was one of the best things that I could have done at the time. And I think Jim is maybe doing this for the same reason. I think maybe he's sitting there going, I have a gut feeling that just having a whole heap of time off and completely getting away from it and doing other activities that are at least keeping some aerobic capacity there, I think he knows how beneficial this is psychologically. Now, I can't speak for him and I have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but I'm just guessing that this is his main reason. I think it's mostly a psychological break. And going back, to what I said before about Rudisha and Bolt, and even Mo Farah was taking 2 to 3 weeks off a year under, Salazar. Now, I know, what's happened to Salazar since, and maybe I shouldn't have brought up that example because you could poke a lot of holes in that for obvious reasons. But look, I think when you've got all these years of volume in the legs, I honestly think that people can easily take 2-3 months off. I think the thing they have to worry about when they come back is their body weight. I think if they go and put on, 15 pounds, that's much slower to run with, and the long grind back to fitness is much harder. Whereas if they can take the break and not gain much weight at all, so they can adjust their intake, because if you go from training for a marathon to training for nothing, your energy expenditure is much lower. If you understand that and you action that and you make sure that you're not gaining weight in the off season, I think returning to running is really easy. Because in 2021, when I say easy, I mean you can get back to very high levels of aerobic capacity or fitness or endurance very fast. Because in 2021, when I took the 6 weeks off, I was hiking and cycling every day for like 2 to 4 hours. I got really into hiking at that point because I was living in Boulder at the time, and Rocky Mountains are right there, 10-minute drive to the start of some of the best trails in the world, you could argue. In fact, that brings up a memory of me doing this hike one day. I was staying in an Airbnb, And I was staying in a private room, so I wasn't having the whole place. It was very early on when I arrived in Boulder, and I did this huge hike through this area in the Rocky Mountains, and I came back and I showed my Airbnb host where I hike because he asked. He goes, "Oh, where'd you go?" And I showed him my route, and he goes, "Did you bring any bear spray with you on that hike?" I said, "No." And he goes, "You're crazy." And I said, what do you mean?" And he goes, "There's loads of bears around there, apparently." I had no idea. I was just cruising on through. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I'm still here today, so no worries. But the point is, I didn't gain any weight in those 6 weeks. In fact, I lost weight. I don't remember exactly how much I lost, but I remember coming back to running and I was a little bit lighter. And I remember thinking after like 7 or 8 weeks, I'm pretty much in 5-10K PB shape already. So, sorry I changed this a little bit towards me, but I can't help but tell these stories sometimes because I have experienced this firsthand. It's real. And I think a lot of people that fear losing fitness, especially over like 3 to 5 days, they have completely been disconnected from reality. I think 3 to 5 days off, especially if you're already fit, does nothing at all. It's probably only going to be a good thing. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Jim. And yeah, I'm appreciate that you told me about that because I didn't even know that he was doing that, and I'd love to do that in the next couple of years. I think I need to take a longer break at some point, especially if I do this back-to-back marathon for this long, as in a year. I think if I do it for a year straight, I'm pretty interested in taking 6 to 8 weeks completely off and just making sure I don't put on any weight. So yeah. And speaking of that, so 10 days post-Houston now. I did my first hard workout yesterday with the Bicarb and joined Sam Long this morning on a run. He's such a legend, Sam Long. People listening may not know who that is, but he's one of the best half Ironman, and T100 triathletes in the world. For quite a while last year, he was ranked, I think, number 1 or number 2, and he finished very high up. And he's just very entertaining. He was telling me lots of stories about Lionel Sanders and Jan, and some of them I probably don't really want to share here. Just personal stuff, mostly about Lionel. It's just so funny to hear Lionel Sanders, that is. I think probably more people listening to this will know who that is. Sam lives in Tucson, and Lionel often spends a lot of time down here. And in fact, I think Lionel lives here, I'm pretty sure. I've never met Lionel, but yeah, great to catch up with Sam. I joined him on a workout this morning, 7 by 1K on 1K float. And yeah, day after a hard workout, but this recovery formula, man, like I woke up today and felt great. And I was thinking to myself, in this run with Sam, I was supposed to do an easy run today. I thought I'll warm up with him and probably just like cruise behind him for the workout and do the cool down with him. But, warm up and felt really good and did the workout and it was fun. So, I have a soccer marathon, 3.5 weeks. I do not have the green card yet, so I'm not super sure if I'm going to be able to make it there, but I have learned in the interim that I can apply for a emergency travel visa, which is not cheap, but $680 to leave the country, and it's not even for sure guaranteed, but I'm going to try and do that. You can only apply within 15 days of departure, so I can't even apply now. But the reason why that 680 sort of justifies in my head is that I actually won that trip to Osaka through being first place Chicago resident at Chicago Marathon, even though I was actually second place, but the first place, Colin McCow, turned it down. So the flights, accommodation, and race entry are all free. Well, I would have got the race entry free anyway because the Elite Field is actually, I think the Elite Field you still pay in Osaka. I think it's like $150. Anyway, yeah, so I saved myself about $2,000 and everything else, and then I paid to leave the country, $680 with the visa. So looking decent that I can at least get that emergency visa, but I'm already checking to see if there's a backup here in case even that gets denied. I mean, I don't know why they would deny that. You could argue that going to a Osaka Marathon is definitely not an emergency situation. I think that's supposed to be for deaths in the family. But look, they don't exactly have a limit on how many visas they can give, so they can, read my application and give me a yes or a no. So I'm not exactly taking someone else's spot. But if they do say no, I think the Ventura Marathon in California is going to be the best bet because it's on the same day, relatively flat, not too far away, pretty good weather. And it's normally won in like 2:18, 2:19. So it'd be really good if someone could challenge me in that race, but I have no idea. Okay, well, we're already 34 minutes in, so get to the workouts of the week. I try and do them around in the middle, and I've got a couple more questions that I'll answer after that. Okay, workouts of the week. Do tag me on Strava if you're using any of these. I always love to see them. I wake up every day to 5 to 10, I think, at this point. It's so good to see. Thank you so much to everyone that does. And yeah, I hope they're helping you out. And yeah, it's important for me to note that sometimes I feel silly like giving specific workouts because you need to, you need to look at the overall picture. That's absolutely critical. Just throwing a workout in at any point doesn't make a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, I think most people listening to this are not recreational anymore. At least some are, most aren't. And they kind of know where to put them in the training plan. And if you don't, the best thing you can do is, here's a way for me to plug something that we currently sell. If you don't, and you're listening to this and you want to learn more and you want to get some advice, but don't want to coach and don't want to pay for a full, coaching experience like what we have at Sweat Elite Coaching Academy, that's over, it's $119 a month. If you don't want that and you can't afford that, the next best option would be, and that is if you're listening to these workouts and you'd love to know how to implement them more, but you don't want to coach and you can't afford a coach, you don't want to pay for one. Our shareholders club at Sweat Elite is probably a really good place for you. Now it does cost, but it's only $10 a month, or $99 a year. So it's like $2.50 a week. Or if you do the $99 a year, it's like $2 a week. And Luke and I, so Luke is my co-host, he's a 227 marathoner, hoping to run closer to 223, 224 in Osaka. We answer questions pretty much every single day in the Discord channel. But the thing is, the questions are public. So if you ask them, everyone can see them. We don't do any one-on-one communication. That's for the people that I coach. So if you're interested in joining that, the link is in the description below. I put it every time. Or you can go to sweatelite.co/shareholders. And with that, you also get the second podcast feed as well. So you then get the once a week, 40 to 45 minute podcast where Luke and I talk all about our training and analyze exactly what we're doing in training leading into these races. So yeah, had no plan to plug it, but would love for you to join if you're interested. And yeah, there's a really good discussion over there at the moment about nutrition and fat adaptation and carbs and fasting. It's going off. So do go and check that out if you want to join us. But the 5K, 10K workout this week is one I made up. I've never done this. I've never seen anyone do it. I had the idea of it, and I'm going to do it at some point because I think it's a good idea. Same with the half marathon one. I quite like these. They're a little bit fancy, and I say this all the time. Sorry, bit of coffee break. I don't think you need to be fancy with training at all. I often mock or make fun of a group that I did a couple of workouts with in Chicago that do 60-minute tempo runs every single week. And the main reason why I mock it is because the coach charges very high prices to do the same workout every week. But the work, because that's just ridiculous in my eyes. But the reason why I bring this up is that 60-minute tempo runs are a great example of a workout that's very effective. But if you do it every week, you'd probably go insane. And you'd start to compare different paces and different, whatever. I think enjoying training is absolutely critical, and enjoying training often means doing some variety. And I've noticed in my own coaching, because I coach a lot of people, have coached a lot of people for a long time, I tend to get a lot more excited, and I find workouts more motivating if they are constantly sort of changing a little bit or getting shorter and shorter. The reps are getting shorter and shorter, or the duration or distance is getting shorter and shorter through the workout. So I've applied a bit of this in here. So that's more to the half marathon workout, but the 5K, 10K workout is 4x2K. You could also do 4 by a mile, but I'm going to go with 4x2K if you're advanced. The first and the third one are the same, and the second and the fourth one are the same. The first and the third one are just 2K at a half marathon effort, right at threshold. So there's 2 minutes rest between every one. The second and fourth one this is ideally on a track, right? Much easier to do this on a track. You can do it outside, but you'd have to be looking at your watch a lot. Or you can program your watch. But the second and fourth one go 100 meters on, 100 meters float, 100 meters on, 100 meters float. It's basically 100 meters slightly faster than your threshold, 100 meters slightly slower, 100 slightly faster, 100 slightly slower. So for me, if I was going to do the 2K thresholds, I actually probably wouldn't prescribe an exact pace for that, because threshold, it's not ideal to set an exact pace because shoes and weather and stress and all these things can massively alter pace. But I'd be doing it. Let's just talk in pace for a minute, just so you get the idea of the variances. But I'd probably aim to do roughly 2K threshold at about 3:05 on a track per kilometer, that is, so 6:10. And then the 100 meters on, 100 meters float, it'd probably be something like 2:55 per kilometer for the on, and then about 3. It doesn't have to be, now that I've gone 10 seconds per kilometer faster, it doesn't need to be 10 seconds per kilometer slower. It can be a bit more than that. Probably 2:55 and then maybe like 3:30, 2:55, 3:30. But then again, when you're talking about 100 meter reps and pace, your GPS probably won't even really do that very accurately because it's such a short window. So I wouldn't worry about the pace exactly here, but you get the idea as to go just a little bit faster than threshold and then float, a little bit faster, float. Very easy on a track because the straights are 100 meters and the bends are 100 meters. That's if you're on an outdoor track. So yeah, that's the workout, 5K, 10K. 4x2K, and all of these are written in the description of the podcast or the YouTube description, because I know many of you listening are running. Half marathon. This is a 9-mile workout, but you can make it shorter, and I'll explain how. 14.4K. You're going to do 1,600 meters at half marathon effort, and then 1,600 meters float, a little bit slower, about a little bit slower than marathon effort, sort of steady state. Then you're going to go 1,400, 1,400, 1,200, 1,200, 1,000, 1,000. So you're reducing every block has 1,600 hard, 1,600 float, 1,400 hard, 1,400 float. And every block has 2 reps, a hard and a float, and you're dropping by 200 meters every time till you get to 200. So 16, 16, 14, 14, 12, 12, 1K, 1K, 800, 800, 600, 600, 400, 400, 200, 200. The way you can make this shorter is just reduce the top ones. You can just take out the mile and the 1,600, 1,600, 1,400, 1,400, and you could start at 1,200, 1,200. You can do the math to figure out how long that is. But if you think that, as 14.4K session is a bit long, because that's very long, although, advanced marathoners and even sort of recreational, very good sub-elite runners would do this. If you wanted to make it a bit shorter, I would cut off the 1,600, 1,600, and maybe even the 1,400, 1,400 and start at 1,200, 1,200, because that would take off around about close to 4 miles. It would take off about 3.8 miles. So then it would be closer to a 5.5 mile workout, which is probably what most people listening would be better off doing. So yeah, you can easily reduce by cutting off the reps at the start. Great workout. Never done that, never heard of it, but something that I will incorporate into my training quite soon. Marathon. Now, I've stolen this workout directly from Clayton Young and Connor Mance and Ed Eyestone. Ed Eyestone, I think that's his name, because I think this is really interesting and it's something that I'm going to be doing a bit more of moving forward. So they do this workout that many of you listening have probably seen on YouTube or on Strava. And if you haven't, then this is good learning for you. Now, being very clear, I've directly taken this from them. This is not my idea. But 8 miles or 13K steady. Steady means a bit off marathon effort, not too far away. If your marathon goal pace is 4 minutes per kilometer or 6:26 per mile, I would do this at about 4:20 and about 6:50 a mile. So steady, definitely not easy, but not quite marathon. The reason for this part is to make the legs feel a bit of fatigue. That's the only reason. It's not really to gain anything. It's just to make the legs a bit tired. And then they're doing 3 by a mile at 5K pace on the track, 5K effort. Now these guys, Clayton Young and Connor Mance, the 2 best marathoners in the US at the moment, are running these in about 4:15 to 4:20. That's 64, 65 second laps. That's really, really fast and really hard. So all you have to do is to think about what's your 5K goal pace and basically run and try and aim for around about there. But I also would probably keep a hybrid psychology approach and not necessarily stick directly to the pace. Think about 5K effort, because if you're dealing with wind or heat or whatever, you're not going to be able to hit your 5K pace for these. It's going to be too hard. But in between each one, take 3 to 4 minutes rest. It's quite long recovery because these are very high intensity VO2 max workouts. Now, I think this is super interesting because up until quite recently, I thought threshold was far more beneficial than sort of VO2 max for marathon training outside of LT1 work and marathon specific pace work. Ed Eyestone seems to think otherwise. He seems to think these long, when I say long, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, very high intensity reps with long rest. Now, I always thought this was sort of more specific to 3K, 5K, but these guys are experiencing a lot of success doing these, so there must be something to it. And I've seen a few examples lately of sort of marathoners reaching, much higher levels than usual by implementing these sorts of reps. So I think this is something that is definitely worth paying attention to and implementing in your own training. I've also seen them do 4 1200s after this 8 mile steady state at around the same pace, 63, 64 second laps with about 3 or 4 minutes rest. It seems like the recovery is often about equal. So if you're running these reps in 5 minutes, maybe take 5 minutes rest. I think the recovery in this is not super important. It needs to be long. It can't be 1 minute or 2 minutes. You just won't be able to do it properly. And plus, that's just a different workout if you try and do that. So they're the workouts of the week. So if you'd like to actually read them, they are in the description of the podcast, and I'd love for you to tag me if you use any of them. Although if you use that last one, don't tag me, tag Clayton Young and Connor Mance. Okay, a couple more questions before we wrap up. I'm going to go to the gym after this and do an easy couple of miles and gym with the Valer app that I've been using. Oh, yeah, if you missed the promo code 2 or 3 weeks ago for Valer that I shared, I'm using Valer, the Strength Mobile app by Joe Skipper and Kate Baldwin, who was on my YouTube channel several weeks back. To use that with a small discount or a free trial, you can use Sweat Elite 10. And I believe you get a small discount on Apple, and I think you can get like a long free trial on Android. Either way, I would check that out. It's been really good. So definitely recommend it. All right. Email. Peter. Hey, Matt. Well done on another 220 run. Not a PB, but I would give my left arm for a time like that, mate. I wanted to reach out, must be key marathoner. I wanted to reach out to you for some possible help with your cramping. I know you have been battling with it in races for some time. This is coming from someone a lot slower and less talented than you, marathon PB 247, but I have found low rep heavy weights training to be hugely beneficial in my durability as a masters athlete. I'm 48. So Valer has been prescribing exactly that. And, in Houston, I didn't really cramp really at all. It was just a few niggling cramps at the very end, but they didn't really slow me down. So I actually think even 5 workouts I think I did before Houston in the gym doing heavy weights, I think that helped. So, yeah. Although Emmanuel also thinks the creatine probably helped, and I think he could be onto something there as well. I have been doing gym work for 20 years, and I believe it has helped my running as I approach the half century. Scary word, half century. I'm not too far away from you, man. I'm turning 38 in like 2 weeks. Kind of scary. For some reason, I have never cramped in races. Call it good luck or lucky management, but I have also been treated by Brad Beer for some Achilles injuries, and he has prescribed heavy weights program for my posterior chain, which I feel have helped enormously. Great physio, Brad Beer. He helped me with my Achilles. In 2 Gold Coast marathons, I suffered really sore calves at 10K and 14K. I felt weak calves was my problem. I did 3 sets of 10 by 100 kilogram calf raises weekly for the next year. In my next year's marathon, I ran an 8-minute PB, 250, and had no calf issues. This could be total mumbo jumbo, but I believe stretching is largely a waste of time, and I found strength work in the gym is usually the answer for injury prevention and rehab from tendinopathy, etc. It might extend to cramping to provide more endurance, resistance, and capability in the muscles. Just thought to help you to get your 216, buddy. Love the show. It's now my favorite with Inside Running podcast. Cheers, mate. Pete. Inside Running podcast, boys. Have you responded to my Ballarat challenge? I haven't heard anything. I don't listen to the show really anymore. I don't really listen to any podcasts in running anymore. I should. I really should. But I'm I'm so into the comedy podcast at the moment, and I don't know. I just, for some reason, this sounds so bad because I literally produce it, but I find most running podcasts, I can't stay engaged with it for that long for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe I've just listened to way too many of them. But Inside Running Podcast, boys, I've heard nothing about my challenge. I thought $5,000 incentive would be pretty good, but I haven't heard anything, so maybe not. Maybe I need to up that. I'm not upping that because I feel like if Julian Spence really wanted to, he could probably switch gears and have a good go at getting that $5,000. So I'd rather not put that any higher. Krogs, I don't think you could, but anyways, I'd love for you to challenge me on that. Okay, back to Pete's email. Yeah. I mean, potentially, I couldn't agree more really when I think about it, because 5 sessions of very heavy weights, specifically on the hamstrings and the calves before Houston, I had no cramping. But then again, Houston was also very cold. And if I've linked correlated anything before to lower cramping or less cramping, it's cold weather. I've talked about that a lot in other podcasts. And so if you're thinking, oh, why don't you just drink more and take more sodium? Like, no, believe me, I've tried that to no end. For some reason, it doesn't work. So thanks for the email, Peter. You are very supportive. I'm really looking forward to going for a run with you when I get back to the Gold Coast. Peter is a very, very well-respected sports journalist in Australia. All right. Manuel email asks, trigger warning for viewers, listeners, since this question is about weight loss. You have been warned. I would skip the next 3 minutes or so if you have any bad experiences around mental health challenges to do with weight loss. Hey Matt, big fan. Recently you mentioned how losing weight contributed to how you finally broke the 220 barrier. I believe I myself have always been a heavier runner. I ran CIM at 205 pounds. That must be 80, close to 90 kilos, and ran 242. Wow, that's really good. I've been trying to break the 240 barrier for the last 2 marathons, and you helped me realize that by simply just losing weight would help me achieve this goal. My current goal now is to run Boston at 180 to 185. Oh man, if you take off 20, 25 pounds and you keep everything else the same, that part should be underscored and put in bold, keeping the power the same. That's the hard part. You're going to immediately shave off 6 minutes and your fitness could be in exactly the same place. For the record, I am 6'2". That's 190-ish centimeters, and I have a lot of body fat to lose. I've heard some people saying that you could run 2 to 3 seconds faster per mile for each pound you lose, but I'm not sure how true that statement is. My question is, how fast do you think I could run my next marathon by simply losing 20 pounds before April 21? And also, do you believe that you could run up to 2 to 3 seconds per mile for each pound of weight you lose? For reference, my half marathon PR is 1:15:58 and marathon PR is 2:42. Thank you and keep up the good work. I love listening to your podcast on my easy runs. So given you've run 1:15, that tells me, yeah, definitely in the range. Look, do I believe 2 to 3 seconds per mile per pound? So I lost 10 pounds, which would be 20 to 30 seconds per mile, which would be 13 to 15 seconds per kilometer. No, I don't think it's quite that much, but it's probably about 50 to 70% of that. Lots of equations going on there. I don't know exactly how much it is, and I think it depends on the person a bit. I think it depends on the percentage of weight you lose as opposed to the pound amount. I could be wrong with that. But it's definitely, I mean, I've heard people say that losing 10 pounds is like doping to them. So that's not my words. I mean, I have to have a think about, I'll try and think about what I believe it was for me. I think I said to someone a few months ago when they asked me, I think I said it's 1 second per kilometer per kilo. Yeah. Because I lost 5 kilos or 4.5 kilos, and I thought it was about 5 seconds per kilometer, which is like 8 seconds per mile, and that is 10 pounds, which would be much less than what you're saying, but maybe it's more, potentially. So, yeah. Cool. All right. Aitor asks, hi Matt, Aitor here once again to ask you about which is your favorite or go-to warm-up routine. Of course, it's not the same for each distance, but I would like to know how you tend to warm up before a marathon and also before a 10K. Asking because I recently heard that Andreas Almgren did some crazy warm-up before breaking the European 10K record in Valencia. Thanks a lot and heads up after Houston. Osaka will surely go better. I wasn't too disappointed about Houston. But, all right, to answer your question, I didn't hear about that, about Andreas Almgren. The first time I heard about it was in your email here, which I read a few days ago. Before a marathon, I think it's quite different to before a 10 and a 5, because in a 10 and a 5, you'll accumulate lactic pretty quickly. And there definitely is benefit to doing a couple of shorter reps of high intensity running before you're about to do a race that produces a lot of lactic very quickly. So a typical, one up there would be 10 minutes easy jogging, and then maybe 2 by 2 minutes. This is very common amongst elite runners. 2 by 2 minutes at about 10K half marathon pace, close to it, with about, the rest doesn't really matter, maybe 2 minutes, 1 or 2 minutes between them. And then maybe a few very fast strides, 3 strides at like mile pace. That seems to be a pretty good one. 2 by 2 minutes and then maybe 3 by 15 seconds, very fast. Before a marathon though, I wouldn't do that, only because you don't produce lactic very early at all, at least if you pace it well and you train well and you fuel well. For a marathon, I don't think you need to do anything fancy. I think you need to jog for between 5 and 10 minutes. That's all. I tend to jog a mile usually, which is about 7 minutes. Do a few stretches, do 2 strides, and you're ready to go. A marathon, you almost need to save your energy for the actual race, because you run out of gas, you run out of energy, you run out of glucose in the marathon. Well, you don't necessarily run out, but if you don't do anything, you run out, you don't take any fuel. And so you sort of need to save your energy in the warm-up to some extent. In the 10K, if you eat normally and eat well before a 10K race and have lots of carbs, you won't run out of glucose, especially if you're under 60 minutes or under 50 minutes especially. But these pros are running 26 to 29 minutes. So yeah, I think for them, there's no real thought about saving energy necessarily, because you can do a lot more of an aggressive warm-up. And I would say that's probably the best one that you could do. I don't know. I'd like to look into what Andreas Almgren did. I'm assuming it's probably something like that. But if you say it's crazy, you probably did maybe a little bit more than that. I wouldn't be surprised. But, it's interesting because I remember back when I was training for the 800 meters, there was a few instances where I did workouts where it would be like 300-400s with 10 minutes rest. right? Like very hard, basically as hard as you can, very specific 800-meter workouts. I remember back then that usually the second one would be the best one. They'd be the fastest and it'd be almost the easiest. And I was like, that's weird. I've already done a hard 400 like 10 minutes earlier. So there's definitely something about if you're about to do something that produces a lot of lactic, if you almost mimic that before it and have a bit of a break, 10 to 30 minutes in between the two, for reasons that I probably couldn't put into words very well, but other scientists and physiologists could, it definitely helps. You probably don't need to hear the physiology, you just need to understand that that works. But I think once you get up to half marathon, and especially marathon, it's not really necessary anymore, is my best answer to that. So, yeah, you made me realize I definitely have to check out the Andreas Algrim warm-up. All right, last question. I think I've got about 4 minutes. Allison. Email. Hey, Matt, I recently discovered the Sweat Elite podcast and I've been obsessed with catching up on it. Nice. I'm especially stoked on the Training Talk series. It's inspiring to me that you're keen on trail stuff and road stuff. With that, as someone who currently writes my own training plans, I wanted to ask a question. Of course, I don't expect a response as I'm not trying to take advantage of free advice. Actually, you've been contributing to my content to make my podcast much easier by submitting questions that I can talk to, so I don't have to come up with any ideas. So thank you. You're very helpful. But you seem genuinely interested in helping people on their journey and talking about different topics, so I thought I'd give it a shot. Here goes. I'm currently training for a 50K where I hope to place top 3 to get automatic entry into OCC. Sorry, I'm actually not sure what that is. A month after that. I'm running Boston where I hope to get a PB and run around 255. I'm wondering if you have any recommendations on how to structure peak weeks. So far, I've been able to feel strong in both simultaneously by mostly focusing on road, but doing a longer trail session per week and an easy run or 2 on trails. But as the road stuff creeps over 30K, I think it might be challenging to do back-to-back long road trail runs. I'm feeling super fit, and I don't think it's impossible to do well at both. Despite the quick turnaround time, I want to give myself my best shot at both, while of course not getting injured. Any thoughts or suggestions on certain podcast episodes to listen to or resources to go to? Thanks a bunch for everything. Have a wonderful day. Okay, the question specifically is, I'm wondering if you have any recommendations on how to structure peak weeks. This is a good question, and I feel like I probably should have tackled this one earlier because I've only got a few minutes left until my friend at the ARU switches off because he does not listen past 60 minutes. And if you do a podcast after an hour, he will turn it off despite how interesting it might be at that point because he's a busy dude and he's too busy busting people like Mo Katir and some of the best runners in the world. I don't know if he did. But look, I probably don't have enough time to answer this in detail because it's probably about a half an hour response, to be honest. But it also really depends a lot on your background. You haven't really talked a lot about that. You're training for a 50K. You're trying to get top 3. A month after that, you're doing Boston. Yeah, look, it is definitely... Look, a 50K and especially a trail race as opposed to Boston, I mean, they're not majorly different with training. Boston's 42.2K, 26.2 miles. It's hilly, much like probably not as hilly as your trail race, but the training should be pretty similar. So if I was you, I would probably just train specifically. Well, it seems like your main goal is the trail race. I was about to say specifically for Boston Marathon and do your trail race off the back of that, but then I quickly realized I think your priority is actually the trail race if you had to pick one or the other. I think firstly you have to define like which one are you actually trying to do your absolute best at, and it sounds like it's the OCC because you actually want to get top 3 to qualify for something else. Whereas Boston, you just have a time goal. And I think if you just train specifically for the trail race, but add in 2 or 3 very specific marathon workouts at your goal marathon pace or just slower marathon effort within 5 to 10 seconds a mile or 3 to 6 seconds a kilometer of 3 by 5K, 2 by 10K, 6 by 3K. You're looking at 15 to 20K worth of volume at marathon pace in a 30 to 35K run. If you can somehow fit those into the plan and then also just train specifically for this trail race, I think you're going to do all you possibly can. That's a very short answer. That's probably a not very good answer, to be honest. I just need more time. But I think that's the most simple answer. I would train specifically for your trail race, but probably 1 run before the trail race, do one of these workouts, actually 2 before the trail race, and then in between the trail race and Boston, you have 4 weeks, I would do 1 of them, exactly in between the 2. But keep it pretty easy in the 4 or 5 days before that. So you've got the trail race, 4 weeks later, Boston. Right in the middle of that, I would do 2 by 10K. But I did that in between CAM in Houston, but I did too much other hard training around it. I would make that probably the only really hard workout you do in between those two races. And I think that's going to make you, as well prepared as you possibly can be at Boston. Yeah, look, I'd love to have more time on that answer, but I've just simply ran out of time. I do need to get to the gym too, because I've only got about an hour and a half until I have another coaching phone call. So thank you everyone for listening in. I really appreciate you all. Do consider joining us in Boulder in April 4th to the 7th, next Globe Runners camp. I'm super excited about these. You can learn more in the link below, thegloberunners.com. It is all inclusive. We have a few people booked already. And yeah, once you arrive, it includes everything: accommodation, food, activities, education seminars, even meeting some professional athletes, and a lot of fun. So do consider joining us. But otherwise, thank you for listening in, and I will speak to you all next week.